We have Kori Schake, who's a research fellow with the Hoover Institute and an associate professor at the United States Military Academy and a friend of the Final Say radio show. We are so glad to have you back, Kori.
I am so glad to be back with you. Please forgive me if you hear a little bit of airport noise in the background.
Well, like I said while we were chatting on the line, it can't be any worse than my producing today.
Thank you for having me, despite the fact that I'm in transit. I always like talking with you out.
No, it is, and I have to say, I mean, I can't think of too many times that we've had so many things to discuss where there's not possibly enough time in a program. But here we are. We're in this really in-depth conversation on the Middle East and what's going on, and we saw over the recent week or week and a half or so another testing of a nuclear bomb in North Korea. We have the wherewithal, and we've been following the flow of Iranian support into North Korea while all this has been going on, so there's obvious cooperation in the programs. And here we are in the middle of the civil war in Syria, changes in governments all over the Middle East, the possibility of an Iranian bomb, and here we are, the three of us, discussing, well, what do we do now?
I think that's right. I would add the thing I found most interesting in the news in the last week is the fact that an Iranian general was killed inside Syria. Highest level Iranian killed. He was evidently there organizing Iranian influence during the Civil War.
No, that's an excellent point. In fact, that one actually draws Israel into the discussion because that's as concerning to them as anyone.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Israelis were helpful to whoever it was that killed him, because he was there clearly engaged in malevolent activity, but also because a general in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, what's he doing in Syria? And so it draws attention to the fact that the Iranians are a force for evil in a bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this discussion with you, and we've gone into great lengths about how come we didn't participate when the Green Revolution in Iran. Why did we support the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt? But now the question really is, Iran is obviously involved and in the middle of all that's going wrong, and they're supporting terrorism. We know they've been in Iraq working against us. We know that they're most likely, we know they're involved in Afghanistan as well. We know they're working with the North Koreans. When is the United States policymakers going to look at Iran as the serious threat that they are, not just sound bites in the media, but take real action? And I don't necessarily mean military action. I mean real action.
If that's not a hypothetical question, which it very well could be in the Obama administration, let me just point out that we're looking at a constellation of John Kerry, Chuck Hagel, Tom Donilon, and Barack Obama. The answer is not in the next 4 years, and the Iranians know it.
Well, that's a frightening scenario because that pretty much means that we're looking at a Iranian nuclear state, and I mean militarized nuclear state, not just nuclearized for the sense of energy, for the purposes of energy.
You're exactly right. And I think that overarching fear is the reason that President Obama is going to get a welcoming reception in Israel on his trip there, because even though I think it's fair to say that the Israeli government was hoping Mitt Romney would get elected instead of Barack Obama, they are looking at 4 years of this administration, and during that time, Iran will almost certainly cross the nuclear threshold. So they're going to have their best manners on in the hopes that it will make a difference in the behavior of President Obama.
Kori, I'm going to have to ask you to bear with the noise on my end. I just started building a bomb shelter under my house, so you may be nervous. So if you hear some shovel, dirt, maybe a little masonry work, I apologize.
That was so well played.
So here's the thing that that I find is interesting to throw another angle in this. I mentioned as you were coming in that this is you could almost look at Syria now as a proxy war game, right? This big square board with all these proxy wars.
Yeah.
U.S. against Russia, Israel against Syria, U.S. against Iran, Hezbollah against Israel. Throw in a little bit of Turkey and the PKK, et cetera, right? So now all of a sudden you're seeing news leaking out about Hamas fighters coming into and fighting on behalf of the Islamists, the insurgency in Syria. And what I worry about that is it seems at a point where Syria is actually a little bit perhaps less prone to throw stuff at Israel because they seem to be fighting for their desperate survival. Now all of a sudden, with Hamas in the works, is Hamas, A, do you know how involved they actually are? And B, doesn't this completely circumvent the ceasefire that was supposedly brokered by Egypt between Israel and Hamas?
I think those are both really important questions. One of the costs we pay for not helping to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad is the radicalization of the rebels. At the start of the Syrian revolution 2 years ago, the Hamas and Hezbollah leadership were being delegitimized for siding with the Assad government, and it was really costing them public support inside Lebanon and inside the Palestinian areas. And with the rebels getting desperate because they can't get help from any place else, you begin to see the radicalization and the Islamist influence coming in to help rebels in Syria. And that's not only making our policy game harder, but it is also recovering the lost legitimacy that Hamas and Hezbollah had experienced by the Palestinian areas and inside Lebanon. So big advantage to them that are able to help this, and I bet we're going to regret it 2 years from now. On the question I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish.
I was going to address here a really important point about the Morsi agreement, and I think you may be right. I think they may be letting up on the Syria part of it because they are cracking down so hard on closing the tunnels from the Palestinian area into Egypt. They may feel that they can burn up some of the goodwill that they've gained as long as they keep a strong hold on what's happening in the tunnels.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and it seems to me that what game is being played with Hamas is very similar to what was happening to Turkey, right, where it was an obvious, and I think we actually discussed this maybe 2 visits ago with you, that the Kurdish rebels, it was a strategic move to sort of unleash or at least facilitate corridors where the Kurdish rebels could start attacking Turkey. And as a part of that, I wonder if there's maybe one positive outcome for here. I noticed recently Israel finally, after a very, very cold, tense 3 or 4 years with Turkey, has released a weapons system sale, a $200 million weapons system sale that had been held up after the incident in trying to breach the Gaza blockade. Is there a sense that the effects of chaos on Turkey is bringing Turkey a little bit closer, maybe toward Israel and toward America, where they seem to be for a while, going more towards the Islamist regimes?
That is such an interesting point. I had not thought about the Israeli angle. You're absolutely right that the Turkish-American relationship has been warming considerably. The government of Turkey had been striking Islamist poses, right, that they were the model for the modern Middle East, and their economy's booming, and they hold elections. Avert your eyes from the fact that they have more journalists in jail than any other country does. And they were holding themselves up as, a foreign policy of no problems with their neighbors. And it was on that basis that they were unwilling to support sanctions against Iran over their nuclear program. And one of the really wonderful outcomes of the advance of democratic demands in the Middle East is that Turkey realized that they were not on the winning side of this. And, you know, by saying they had no problems with the authoritarian governments in their neighborhood, they were, in fact, losing credibility with the publics of the broader Middle East. To their great credit, the Turkish government, you know, readjusted itself, stopped making excuses for Assad, and started leading pressure, trying to bring us into being more helpful. And that does actually give them a lot to be talking about with the Israelis these days, and a lot of ways in which Israeli help can help the government of Turkey manage this crisis. So you're right. I had not thought about that before you mentioned it, but I can see a lot of reasons now that you raise it that they would want a quiet dialogue that may repair this damage.
There are two follow-ons to John's question that I would have is, one, when you look at Turkey and you go back in history with the Persian and Ottoman empires, right now as you see Iran all over the place and gaining holds all over not just the Middle East but North Africa, maybe it's a time for Turkey to really understand that they are part of the European Union, they're a part of a lot of these organizations, and that they should be playing more along with the Europe, the United States, and maybe forming relationships with Israel in a better light. But also in looking at that, should Turkey be playing a bigger role in maybe supporting France and some of these other uprisings in North Africa or within Africa, such as Mali?
Yeah, that raises 2 points for me. The first is, now that you mention it, I noticed that the French government, the Hollande government in France, has lifted France's hold on negotiations with Turkey about its EU membership. You'll recall when Sarkozy was in power, he had basically said, "over my dead body." And the Hollande government that got elected, 8 months ago or so, has made a big public point about the fact that they think Turkey has a future in the European Union, and they think that the negotiations should go ahead. So uncharacteristically helpful move by the Europeans to facilitate Turkish realignment in that way. I am skeptical that Turkey actually has the capacity to send troops and assistance to Mali and other places. The Turkish military is good at the job of defending Turkey. They don't have a whole lot of power projection capability, and I'm skeptical they have a lot of sustainment capability. But working in partnership with us and with other countries, we could piece together that mosaic. I'd be very surprised, though, if they were willing to take a larger role without a whole lot of encouragement and help. But you're right, we should be giving them that encouragement. They've got a lot of experience with it from their own domestic struggles with the PKK.
Well, the question for me would be, we're looking at a scenario where we're sending F-16s and advanced weaponry such as the M1 tanks to Egypt. So what you just said makes me feel that instead of sending a lot of these things to Egypt, we should send maybe just financial aid to Egypt and send weaponry to Turkey in helping to build, give them strength, but help repair and continue to build that relationship.
I also think there are a lot more ways we can be helpful in Egypt's democratic transition than bulking up their military, who have been a stabilizing force, but they have not been advantageous. I mean, they bungled the transition. They're sort of looming in the background, suggesting if things go wrong, they could take over again. I'm not enthusiastic about the role that the Egyptian military is playing. And the Egyptian government, for all of its difficulties, all of its inexperience, they understand that their biggest problems are economic problems, and that unless they find a way to persuade the IMF that they're deserving of a loan, They're less than 2 months of currency reserves at the moment for the world's largest importer of wheat. They are really in trouble unless they start to iron their economic problems out. And we could be, I think, much more helpful in getting Egyptians the kind of government that Egyptians are trying to get themselves. But, of course, we are hemmed in by the fact that we made this deal in order to get the Egyptians not to be a threat to Israel. And the Egyptian military, as tasteful as they are, they have kept their end of the bargain.
Yes, this is true, and you all very good points. Well, Kori, we're coming up towards the end of our program. I want to thank you so much for joining us, and safe travels wherever you're heading. And we'd love to bring you back very soon because John is.
I would like to come back very soon. You guys are always fun to talk to, and as today's conversation demonstrates, you give me things to think about that I hadn't figured for myself. So thank you.
Well, we're going to leave you with one more thought to think about for our next show, next appearance, and that is, why is it so quiet around Jordan right now?
Oh, I look forward to that conversation. Goodbye, gentlemen.
Okay.